We are here in April for our no, our only webinar this month, and it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we are partnering with Project Callisto and End Rape on Campus to prepare and give you the content and some really, really huge action items that you can take um, today, tomorrow, the next couple days to really elevate the message and to end this organizational piece that is really systematic around our country. And so I am so excited to introduce our two guests this evening or this afternoon, whatever part of the country you're in today. First, we have Eliza Milliken, and she is the community liaison on the partnerships team at Callisto. And this is you'll hear more about this organization, but when I heard about them, I thought they were so cool. They partner with colleges and universities like the ones you go to provide alternate reporting options to survivors of sexual assault. So you'll hear a few things about their tools and how to potentially get them on your campus. Um, Eliza's from Colorado and she has a degree in political science. And then we also have Sophie Karasak, we are so pleased and excited. She's an Ignite alumni from here in our Bay Area programming. She's on the East Coast now, and she is a co-founder of End Rape on Campus. She went to UC Berkeley, and she was so instrumental. For those of you who were at our conference a couple years back, you would have heard her breakout session on really holding universities accountable to the Title IX policies. And she was also a huge advocate for California's groundbreaking affirmative consent laws within the state. And so I am going to turn it over to them. Use just a couple housekeeping pieces again. We'll use our chat box for questions and answers a little bit later on today. Please take notes and know too that this is being recorded so that you can use it, watch it at your leisure many times after today, and then also have as a backup to really support yourself in taking action moving forward. Awesome. So take it away, ladies.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the webinar today, and thanks to Ignite for having us. I'm really excited to be here. So I wanted to start by giving a bit of context about why we're talking about this issue and how we got to the point where campus sexual assault has been identified publicly as one of the biggest problems that we're facing in this country today. So many survivors have started to connect through social media about the experiences that they've had on college campuses around the country. And it's not just that they've been able to connect, but also that they've been able to hold their institutions accountable to a federal law called Title IX. Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, as well as gender identity and gender expression in school. And so survivors actually started filing Title IX complaints against institutions to the US Department of Education, saying that, these cases are being swept under the rug. They are not being addressed appropriately. Schools are trying to protect their reputations as opposed to prioritizing campus safety. And so survivors started to use this as a tool with complaints. You act to the Department of Education. You don't need to have an attorney. And so that was something that was different as well. And so some of the things that people were alleging in the complaints was that schools weren't taking action that they needed to take, such as eliminating the harassment, preventing its reoccurrence, or addressing its effects, which is important because sexual assault and sexual harassment can really affect your ability to gain education, right? And also, schools are supposed to use what's called the preponderance of the evidence standard, which means that it's easier than in the criminal justice system to find them responsible for sexual violence. And if anyone has questions about that in further detail, I can explain later. But the point being that Title IX was a really instrumental tool for survivors to really connect and then also use the media to hold their institutions accountable. So not only being able to connect and file complaints, but being able to reach out to a local newspaper and then to national media too and say, hey, this is actually not isolated to one particular campus, but rather this is an issue that's plaguing the entire country. So what's happening in California is also happening in Texas and also happening in Pennsylvania and Tennessee and Kansas and all these different places. And so framing it as a national issue is really important. Some of the other laws that are important, that have been important for survivors too, and we've also been able to file complaints under, the first one is the Clery Act, which mainly pertains to statistics, but also and ensuring that schools are publishing statistics of incidents that are happening on or near campus. But also there's a campus sexual assault victims bill of rights that schools are required to have too. And so that means that you're supposed to be notified of your options to go to law enforcement or have academic accommodations or change your living situation, or go to counseling. And then also that if you do choose to go through a proceeding, that you're supposed to have a fair process. So being able to present, just as the assailant can present their case, also having the opportunity to be notified of the outcome of that case. And so not just Title IX, but also Clery have been helpful for survivors to use. And something that I'll touch on briefly is that it also requires preventative education, as of 2013, 2014. And that's a pretty vague term, but as we're talking about this issue, I encourage you to think about, okay, does my university have preventative education? If so, is it online or is it in person? Did I, just click through this when I was a first year? Do other students care about this training, or is it just something that people brush aside? So thinking about that as well. And then another intersection that I want to ensure that folks are thinking about too is how disability intersects with sexual violence. So students with disabilities are disproportionately targeted for sexual violence. And then also students who experience sexual violence often develop disabilities, including depression, anxiety, sleeping problems, and other mental health issues that may need accommodation. And many survivors aren't able to get those. So that's another law that is enforced by the Department of Education, and survivors have filed complaints under. So all of this is to say that over the past couple of years, survivors have really brought this issue to the forefront by speaking out about these experiences, and that it has become fairly well known that many schools aren't handling these cases well. And that actually contributes to a culture on campus of people not coming forward, and that could both mean reporting to the school or even seeking counseling or telling a friend. So one of the important things to remember throughout this as well is that we want survivors to feel like they're being supported in whichever way is best for them. And that's a big part of what Callisto does too, and which will be touched on shortly. So the issue of underreporting is something that is fairly multifaceted, but many people don't report because they don't know that it's actually that going to be taken seriously, or it doesn't fit the myth of a perpetrator jumping out of the bushes at you. And so if you have an experience that doesn't fit that, it can be difficult to want to come forward if you're anticipating that there are no witnesses or physical evidence, and that doesn't make the experience any less valid, but that does often make folks reticent to come forward. And so that's a bit about the underreporting predicament. But Callisto is a really interesting and innovative solution to some of those issues. So Eliza, if you want to about that.
Yeah, thanks so much for kicking that off, Sophie, and thank you, Ignite, for hosting this. This is really exciting. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit all about Callisto and who we are and what we do. So Callisto is an organization that works with colleges and universities to provide alternate reporting options and support services to survivors of sexual assault. And we do this through a website that we offer and partner directly with schools to kind of create a customized experience for each school. So the problem of campus sexual assault, which Sophie talked a little bit about, I want to highlight 3 points that are important within that culture that are contributing to really negative cultures on campus right now in terms of the way that schools are responding to sexual assault and the way that they are able to respond to incidents. So as Sophie mentioned, you have incredibly low reporting rates. Very few students do end up coming forward to their school or to the police. And so there's a huge population of survivors who aren't getting served, who aren't getting the resources in person that they need. Then you've got delayed reporting. So if a survivor does choose to come forward, they wait around an average of 11 months to do so, at which point some of the details can be more difficult to remember. The way that the brain works in terms of remembering traumatic incidents can be way different than we remember an everyday experience. And so when survivors are waiting that long to come forward, it can be difficult to remember some of the details or to speak to it to the school in a way that the school will hear. So you have delayed reporting. And then you have repeat offenders. So around 90% of assaults on campuses are committed by repeat offenders. So you have a high amount of incidents being committed by a small number of people. But because there is really low reporting rates, these repeat offenders aren't being identified. So they're continuing to commit assaults on their campuses. And because they're going unpunished, it creates a culture where there isn't a strong deterrent for committing sexual assault, unfortunately. So it creates this really negative culture on a lot of campuses. So the Callisto solution, what we came up with in terms of combating these specific issues around campus sexual assault. So our founder, Jess Ladd, she consulted survivors, community advocacy groups, and experts around campus sexual assault and came up with this website that has 3 main pieces of functionality in terms of interaction around reporting. And then there's a separate piece that is just resources. So when we partner with school, we talk to the school and get information around all of the resources that are available for survivors, not just on campus, but also off campus, because we know that on campus resources aren't always right for everyone. Some people may not feel comfortable coming forward to their school. So we gather all of that information, including not just where someone can report an incident, but what that whole process is going to look like. Because if someone does choose to take that route, we want to make sure that they feel they have all of the information around what the situation is going to be like so they can know if that feels right for them or not. So there's that piece of resource. Additionally, we include information for supporters of survivors, because even if a survivor chooses not to report, they may tell a friend, and not all friends are equipped to respond in a way that's supportive. And that response to a first disclosure is really important. So we provide suggestions on ways to react and ways to support a friend through beginning to process what's happened to them. And then you have the 3 main pieces of functionality that you see up here on the slide. So record, report, and match. Our record creation form is similar to an electronic journal entry, but it's time-stamped, it's passphrase encrypted. It's a way for survivors just to begin to save details of what happened to them so that they can begin to process through what has happened. And so that if they do choose to report at some point, if that's the right decision for them to make, then they have this record that's including all of the details that they wish to share with the school. But them waiting that average of 11 months doesn't negate the quality of the report that they're able to provide. And I do want to stress again, the right decision is what the survivor wants to do. There's no one right way to begin to process through what's happened. It's different for every individual. So there's this record form, and I'll actually show you what that looks like in a little bit. Then survivors have the option to report directly from the website. So they can send their record in straight to the Title IX coordinator so that they have all of the information that a survivor wishes to share in their hands at the start of the reporting process. And then lastly, we have a matching functionality. So we know that there are a lot of social barriers that people experience in terms of wanting to come forward, as Sophie mentioned earlier. feeling like it was an isolated incident, worrying that you won't be believed, or also not wanting to get a friend in trouble. As Sophie mentioned, there's this myth of the stranger popping out in the alleyway. And while that does happen, a lot of times, actually around 80% of assaults are committed by someone that the survivor knows. So that can create a whole other set of barriers in terms of coming forward if that's the right thing to do. So with this matching functionality, this allows survivors to enter the name of their perpetrator into our software and then decide to come forward only if and when someone else names the same perpetrator. So how does this help? With the record form, survivors are able to provide stronger and more accurate details if and when they're ready to report. The matching functionality allows survivors to protect their community as part of their healing process if that is something that they want to engage with. By putting these resources, sort of all the information around what does an investigation look like and who can I go to and what are all the next steps going to be, by putting those resources next to the reporting function, this helps students make informed decisions around what's right for them. Additionally, as I spoke to earlier, the first disclosure is really, really important. And actually, if someone discloses and has a negative reaction to that, to sharing their story, that can have long-term detrimental effects on their recovery process. So this record form creates a safe space where it takes away the option of a negative reaction to that first disclosure. So someone can just begin to share what's happened to them in a safe, controlled, trauma-informed environment. And then lastly, we are a third party. We do partner with schools, but our aim is to serve survivors and to provide a space that is safe and that survivors can trust. And so we are a third party website, and that can help in terms of students' ability to feel like it's a safe space. So this is what the Callisto website actually looks like. I'll just show you a couple pieces. If a student wants resources, anyone can come to their school-specific Callisto website. If they want to begin to record details, we have them create an account on Callisto with the username and password. And then this is what their dashboard would look like before any record is created. The support services and reporting options are up at the top, so at any point, those can be accessed. The record form consists of 13 questions, and it's in the when, where, what, and who style. We know that this is the best way for survivors to remember not only the most information, but also the most accurate information. So each section includes some multiple choice questions. In each multiple choice question, there's the option to say other, I'm not sure, or I'd rather not say. This is because we never, ever want someone to feel pressure to answer a question if they're not comfortable. There's also a freeform section in each of these to include details that may be helpful in remembering what has happened at a later date or may help jog a memory or just anything that someone wants to include in their own record. And this is that dashboard again. So once one has created a record, there's a few different options of what they can do. They can begin the reporting process. They can also enter a name into that matching functionality. Then they can also go back in and edit at any time. We save a timestamp of when the record was first created and then also when it was last edited, because we know that memories may come back at different points, and so we want that to be able to be easily accessible. And then someone can also download and print their PDF or a PDF of their record, and then they can delete it if they don't feel comfortable having that anymore. So the campus impact that we have seen to date. So we're currently now on 10 campuses, but we're only a little over a year and a half into being live. And so when we did this data, we were actually only on 2 campuses. They were our first year 1 schools. So just to kind of give you a snapshot of that, with, again, the intention of Callisto is to provide agency and information to survivors. So with those really low reporting rates on Callisto campuses, we have seen up to a 300% increase in reporting. And with that sort of long wait time of survivors waiting around an average of 11 months to report, we saw about over half of Callisto users saving details for later. So they were creating records and using Callisto to process through what's happened to them, again, in that safe space. And then thirdly, with that sort of limited deterrent and that culture with the repeat offenders, we saw that 84% of first-year students on Callisto campuses were aware of Callisto. And if they did know about Callisto, they were twice as happy with their reporting options, even if they hadn't used the website. And it was contributing to a culture where they felt that their school was taking sexual assault very seriously. So we've been excited to see these results, and in fact, glad that survivors are feeling that this has been a useful tool in helping to begin to look at some of that negative culture that is going on right now on campuses. So as students, what can you do? What are some things that you can get into in terms of potentially bringing Callisto to your school or just starting the conversation around survivor support. So if we have any high school students listening into this webinar, you may have been accepted to a school, you may be looking at multiple schools. Talk to your prospective school, call them up and ask them what they're doing to support survivors and what sort of options they have. And you can ask about Callisto and if it's something that they've considered. If you are a current college student, organize a movement, spread awareness on campus. You can gather support from peers, either within a group that you belong to or just talking to sort of like-minded students and engaging them on what are their needs, what do they hope to see happening on campus. Start a petition, and then engage with your administrators. So Title IX coordinators are who we usually work with as an organization, but talk to your dean of students or any administrator who's involved in campus sexual assault. Students, you're incredibly powerful. Your voices are being listened to, and so it's really exciting to see what can happen when I work with students. I do work with students on a regular basis in terms of talking about how to begin to bring Callisto to our campus. And then lastly, I would say if you're going to take away anything from, I think what we're talking about is believe survivors. You know, unfortunately, we don't live in a culture where survivors are automatically believed, but supporting each other and building community on an individual basis and connecting with people is a form of activism. So I really urge you to kind of keep that in mind all the time. And if you want to find out any more information around Callisto, please go to our website or check out our Twitter, anything like that, and reach out with contact info at the end. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it back over to Sophie. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Eliza. So I wanted to talk a bit more about how we can have some sort of tangible effects at varying levels. So from the legislature to the campus to your own interpersonal relationships. So first, I want to say that, this is very difficult to talk about. This is a hard issue. And so taking care of yourself is really important. I know I'm trying to do a better job of this every day. And I encourage you to, ensure that you're healthy and safe as well. And, to not feel obligated to burn yourself out. That's not the best. But that being said, I want to talk a bit about some of the ways that we've been able to engage in activism that has actually changed policies from a state level as well as a campus level basis. So, for instance, in California, we were able to pass Yes Means Yes, and in Virginia, we passed healthy relationship education. And those are two of the main priorities that we've had over the past couple of years. So, in effect, we, as an organization at Rape on Campus, believe that we have to start talking about the issue of campus sexual assault much earlier than college. There are many students who experience sexual assault in school. And so advocating for healthy relationship education is a really great way to change that culture. And so that could be on the state level, but also can just be in your own local community. So think about what was it that you were told about consent at your high school, if anything. What do you wish had been provided in your school? And calling up the principal of the school and saying, hey, what is the school doing about this now? These were some of the things that I was seeing when I was a student there. What are you doing to address this? Does your district have a Title IX coordinator, which is the person who's supposed to be responding to these kinds of incidents? So thinking really about the kinds of changes that you would like to see in your own community can also be a way of thinking or creating a foundation for what can be done on the state level as well. One of the priorities that I've listed here too is privileged and confidential survivor resource specialists. So oftentimes survivors are just looking for somebody to tell about what has happened and not necessarily to report that, or they're not sure what they want to do yet, if anything. And so many schools have brought on folks who are just supposed to serve in that capacity. So they're not investigators, they're not long-term therapists, but they guide you and tell you what your options are and help make arrangements for you. So that's one of the main things that we've advocated for as well. In terms of community change, we've seen lots of folks really take action, not just on the college level, but also in high school. So some of these photos are from various high schools that did teach-ins about your rights under Title IX, also did some workshops about healthy relationships, and in the top right hand corner, some folks who were working to get their school district's Title IX policy changed were giving public comment at their school board hearing. So there are lots of ways that you can work to make reforms right in your own community too. And rape crisis centers and other community organizations can be great partners in that. For some more specific practices about how to organize a campaign, so like how do I write a press release and that kind of thing, I encourage you to check out Know Your Nine's organizing toolkit. They are a really great organization that has put this wonderful toolkit together. So lastly, I really want folks, if nothing else, to take this away from this presentation today. So supporting survivors is incredibly important, but what does that really look like? And so some of the main things that we advocate for at UROC are the importance of validating that survivors' choices and making it clear that you believe them, you'll support them, that it's not their fault and that they're not alone. And having that positive first response or having a positive reaction can really make a huge difference in how they recover, and whether they decide to report or seek counseling even. So not pressing for details or listening without judgment are some of the most important things to remember too. So ultimately, these are some of the goals that we have. Ultimately, we want to be free from sexual violence on our campuses, and we believe that the combination of these things, supporting survivors, having comprehensive education, having a prompt and equitable adjudication process on every campus, and transparency and accountability are really key to that. So should we take questions now, Sarah, do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave up your contact information slide, because I see people are tweeting, and so I just want to make sure that you get some social media love. So I'm gonna go back up a little bit, and first, thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Eliza. When I initially talked to the both of you separately, I was like, this isn't my veg or avenue of expertise at all, and so we're really excited. I know that this topic is really challenging. I know that it's also one that a lot of our young women face. And so I'm really happy that we're able to, one, give resource, and then two, just give space to be able to talk.
Oh, Sarah, are you still there? Hmm. Well, I think just looking through this, one of the questions that I see is, do you have suggestions on how to be a more visible resource as a student organization?
In this particular month, as we really.
Oh, okay, now I hear you. Oh, sorry, Sarah, you dropped off a bit. I don't know if that was an issue for others.
Okay, is that better?
Much
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
So that's so weird. It's just switching ears. So everybody that was literally putting the left in the left and the right in the right. How ridiculous. Anyway, that was the same question I was going to too, Sophie, was do you have suggestions on how to be a more visible resource as a student org for other students? And I know that a couple of our chapters are on here too, one from Georgia State and from UCLA. I see that members are, I just recognizing their names. So and some of them are specific to sexual assault, but I'm curious even for them, and then for also like Ignite chapters exist on our high school and our college campuses, how can they be more visible?
Yeah. So something that got us a lot of visibility when I was a student at UC Berkeley was that we made posters for something called the Cal Consent Campaign, which was basically well, there were a couple different poster series. So like for Halloween, we did a poster series that was like, my dress is not a yes, my costume does not equal consent. Uh, and then, some other like education resources that were, put up in a way that was like visually like well designed, and like putting that around campus in places where people would see it. And that actually had the effect of actually making more students go to the student counseling center for sexual assault incidents, which was like not something we were anticipating at all. But just by having that validation, that was something that made people more aware of the student counseling center. I think that there are definitely ways um, to spread your message by doing, like, I know Bruin Consent Coalition at UCLA has done a lot of really great visual work that has made them pretty widely known on campus. Um, so I think like thinking about where students' eyeballs are and trying to meet them where they're at is really important. And also doing like op-eds in the newspaper and sharing stuff on social media can be a great way of generating visibility too.
Eliza, do you have anything else to add?
Listening to that answer, I think everything that I would say, Sophie touched on, just, again, wanting to reiterate what she said, it's different on every campus in terms of where students get their information, but kind of finding out what are those channels. Are they bathroom stall posters? I know that's can be a big one across campuses, or, the school newspaper, social media, just kind of pulling around and getting a sense of where students get their info on campus, and then really kind of teaming up with whoever or whatever organization provides that can help with visibility.
Awesome. Um, the next question is from Carly Flannery. Carly writes, we will be implementing Callisto on our campus sometime this quarter. Ooh, that's awesome. And they've been working with students and student organizations throughout the process. Oh, she's offering, if anyone has questions about the process that they've been going through, please let them know. She's happy to answer. Eliza, do you want to give a quick rundown though, since that's your day job, of how to make that happen, what other folks can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Carly, thank you so much for offering up that information. So we are really excited Stanford's one of our newest Callisto campuses. And their students were really instrumental, along with some admins, in working together to get this process started. So what I actually do, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I work with students a lot, usually students who are members of student government. I get a lot of outreach, and it's students wondering, hey, we've heard about Callisto. We're really excited about you. We're wondering how to start the conversation on our campus to bring you all to our campus. And actually, Hobart William Smith, I noticed we had a member joining us from there as well. Hobart William Smith is also a Callisto campus, so I just wanted to say hello. But mostly, so I then I'll get on the phone and start working with members of the student government, or any student who wants to engage, and figure out, okay, who are their administrative contacts who we would work with. So it's usually members on the Title IX team or different sexual assault response team. Work with those students to draft email language in terms of talking to administrators if they want help with that. I'll help provide different informational resources around Callisto so that they can share that with their group, and sort of be a little bit of a liaison on campus. So I can talk to students myself, or it's wonderful when you have a peer, kind of educating peer situation. So it's really just beginning to spread the word, and I help students do that. And then they usually will initiate meetings with the Title IX coordinator and folks in that office, and start that conversation. And then they'll connect me to the Title IX team, so that we can start directly conversing about sort of the nitty-gritty aspects. And then usually what happens is we'll get to a point where I can do a demo and do like a whole walkthrough of the website and show a lot of folks get, campus safety, sexual assault response, health and wellness folks all in the same room to show them what's going on, and then we sort of go from there. But students are really instrumental in making that process happen, because it's really them who we are working with, and it's their needs that we are hoping to meet. So that's been really wonderful in a few instances.
Awesome. Thank you. Kristen Baker and George are rights, and I actually don't know much about this bill. So Sophie or Eliza, if you do know, if you could
Yeah.
give us a little bit of context with HB 51, which is going to Betsy tomorrow. Would this be a possible solution for people who don't want to disclose to police? Will this protect those students from the suggested mandatory reporting processes?
Yeah. So for some context about that bill, so student organizers, just speaking to the power mentioned earlier that y'all have, student organizers in Georgia were able to defeat House Bill 51, which would basically would have required survivors to have gone to law enforcement if they wanted their school to be handling their case uh, directly in conflict with Title IX. So survivors are supposed to be able to go through the process regardless of whether they go to the police. Education is a civil right. Sexual harassment and violence infringe upon that. But this was viewing it as solely a criminal issue. Um, with regards to it going to Betsy DeVos tomorrow, that are basically like she's meeting with the person who sponsored that bill. That's certainly concerning to us. Um, and some of these mandatory reporting bills have been cropping up around the country, including in Texas. There's a bill that's been moving quite quickly there as well that is concerning to us. And so that goes directly against giving survivors the autonomy that they need, um, to be able to recover. So I don't know if Eliza, you wanted to talk a bit about how Callisto addresses that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for providing that context. This is something a little bit that we have come across because being a third-party platform and with our record creation form, this does allow students to create this record in a private space, and it doesn't go anywhere. When a student first creates a record, they are the only people who have access to that. Not even our Callisto staff can access that identifying information around their incident and who they are as a person. And so it can help with that if a student isn't ready to go to a mandated reporter or they're not ready to share that info with anyone. The record form is a great way for them to just begin to kind of process through and piece through what's happened in a safe space. And if they then decide that they want to share that information with the school to begin an investigation, they have to take direct action to do that and to share their report. And at that point, then they can share it with the school. But before that, they're the only ones who would have access to it. And they also then have access to all those resources that I spoke to that are specific to their campus. So they can go on Callisto, get information around their resources, record details of their assault, and kind of use those tools to process through before sharing it with anyone else. So there's no risk of their assault being shared with anyone without their consent or being shared with the police. Callisto is not connected to the police at all. So this is something that we've talked a lot with schools about in terms of difficulty with mandated reporting. And this allows students a safe space to kind of share their information when and if they want to.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen that are on the webinar, we have just a few more minutes left. If anybody has any last questions for Sophie or Eliza, you can ask them now, or you can stalk them on their. You can connect with them over email or Twitter. Post this time together. Um, no one's excitingly writing. I think your presentation was so incredibly informative that they have so much to take away from this. Um, I also don't believe in holding up people to eat dinner either, and I know poor Sophie is on this coast and it is past 8 p.m. So ladies, thank you so much for being here this afternoon slash evening. I am really fortunate to be able to know the two of you to be able to share these resources with our young women. So thank you so much for your time, for sharing this content. I know that our chapters are definitely thinking about how they can implement this individually and collectively, and then make a tidal wave on their school sites as they finish out the year. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the content. We'll be as you all know, we've been recording, so I will share this link as a follow-up tomorrow with everybody so that you have this together. And then I see that people are connecting with each other, which is the other joy of being able to do these webinars across the country. So thank you so much, and have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you so much.
We're still tight. Now they're typing.
Oh.
Or just gratitude. Okay, thank you. Have a safe way home, everybody.